This is a Media Lab podcast.
Nuts, Dave, you won again. How is it that you're so good at playing Hearts when you've never played it before last week?
Well, I really like to, I don't know, actually. Do you just put this card down? What does this card mean?
God, what? Yes, that is exactly what you're supposed to do. All right. Well, I guess I'll just put this little tick up here on the wall here again. That's 795 to 2. I'm almost geared for a comeback, I think, Dave.
One step at a time.
All right. I know I'm almost thinking that I've forgotten my name being here.
I'm lost. Why would you forget your name?
I don't know. Maybe it's like I've been sucked into a spirit world, and the only way to remove myself from said spirit world is to remember who I am. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here.
So, what next?
Whoa! I didn't even know the machine could walk.
Did you install legs, or is that an upgrade?
I didn't. This is a bit vexing, I'm going to say, Dave.
That's a good word.
Hi, idiots. I see that you haven't killed yourselves in the past week. That's too bad. We're very far from Earth. I saved you from a different apocalypse, one that I didn't create. That's too bad. Until we can start our return, you're going to talk about films in the top 250 on Letterboxd. So strap in.
All right, Dave, I guess we're still reviewing movies.
Well, at least it sounds like we don't have to do bad ones. What's up first?
Spirited Away.
Oh, better than Message in a Bottle.
In his own garage, Kyle has built a machine, cobbled together with parts found in his friend's church basement and a dumpster behind the local Dairy Queen. This monstrosity is now alive and evil. Kyle has convinced his friend Dave to help stop the apocalypse by reviewing films the machine picks. The ultimate purpose is still unknown, and Kyle could have probably done this himself, but he's not being dragged to hell alone. This is Kyle and Dave versus the machine.
I'm so glad that this podcast setup has actually just been provided here for us by the machine. So welcome to Kyle and Dave versus the machine. My name is Kyle.
Do we know our names?
I've remembered it now.
You're free.
I'm free.
And I'm the machine.
This is a podcast where a sentient machine was forcing us to watch movies in order to prevent it from initiating the apocalypse. Bad news. I think it has happened. Although we do tend to talk about the ideas of the movie rather than the movie itself. Currently, due to technical difficulties, we are now stuck in this small circular room filled with technology, and today we're going to be watching the film Spirited Away.
怖がるな。私はそなたの味方だ。口を開けて、これを早く。この世界のものを食べないと、そなたは消えてしまう。じっとして。裏のくぐり戸から出られる。外の階段を一番下まで降りるんだ。そこにボイラー室の入り口がある。ここでは仕事を持たない者は湯婆婆に動物にされてしまう。
湯婆婆？
会えばすぐにわかる。ここを支配してる魔女だ。辛くても耐えて機会を待つんだよ。私は千尋の味方だ。
どうして私の名を知ってるの？
そなたの小さい時から知っている。私の名はハグだ。
Dave, I am so excited. Whoa, I think...
What is that?
This? I think it's... Sorry, it's the machine is telling me to push this button here.
So
It
bright.
looks like so bright. It looks like a hologram is here. Chris Taniguchi? Is that
Is
you?
that a person?
Where am I? I was watching a bunch of anime, and then the screen just turned blue. And Kyle?
Yeah, this is wild. I have been transported to some weird place here for a week ago, and it's so nice to see a familiar face that isn't Dave.
Oh,
to be
man.
perfectly honest.
Dave, hi. I'm Chris. Nice to meet you. I've been
Nice to
seeing
meet
you
you too.
around. Your broadcasting has reached us all.
wait.
It plays automatically in my room, so I don't really have a choice in the matter.
Kyle, does that mean the world isn't over?
I guess that's good. The good news. Maybe once
Then
we
where are
escape
we?
this semi-prison, we'll go back to a more positive and inclusive place. Hey, Chris, do you have like a couple hours just to spend watching the movie Spirited Away with us?
Yeah, why not?
What? I'm so glad that our guests are so willing just to come along with this journey. I should just point out, too, before we go too much further, a big thank you to our patron Green Girl YYC for helping us over on our Patreon page. Really helps out. See the different things that we're posting over there. We've had nothing but time here this week, but at the end of this episode, you'll hear actually a preview for our talk on existence. If you want to go
existence.
and listen to
Existence.
Yes.
Existence. Wait, is that it?
It's a film that we did watch, and we talked about it briefly. I think, have to answer a few different things here, folks. I think we need to talk a little bit about our history with Miyazaki films in general, and then maybe this film in particular. Chris, why don't you start? What is your history with the Miyazaki oeuvre?
Oh man, so I have let animation and anime into my home like since I was 4, maybe. So I was no stranger to the themes that came up in Miyazaki movies, but it hit quite differently, I think. There was always this sense of mystery and danger when I was going to watch a Miyazaki film because, they were introducing these like brand new worlds, and something was always a little bit off, and I was a little bit scared of it as a kid, and I was also just drawn in. Yeah.
Ooh, a little double entendre there, a little drawn in. I'm curious, what is the first Miyazaki film you watched?
I think it was Spirited Away.
It was, okay.
Yeah.
I like how you termed it, though, there, it being a little bit scary. In my opinion, it's just one opinion, I always think that that's my favorite type of animation. The ones where it's like, yeah, I'm enjoying the story, but as a kid, I was like also a little scared and terrified of. It was something about that like push-pull. I felt safe, but at times like, ooh, this is a little bit too scary for me. Mm-hmm. Do you recall what you thought about Spirited Away the very first time you watched it?
It was so beautiful. I was definitely scared. I definitely watched Chihiro's parents turn into pigs, and I think I ran out the living room because like I needed a moment. But then like I started seeing like a lot of charming things. It's like looking at a really ugly pug. At first you want to kick it out of the room, but then something about it charms you.
Interestingly enough, that is exactly what I thought the first time I met Dave. So Dave, what is your history with Miyazaki?
Well, I was introduced to anime by my buddy Juwon, and his older brother was more into mechs.
Oh, so nerds.
So I can't remember the first time I watched, like they had like Totoro, paraphernalia at their house and stuff like that. But I didn't watch a Studio Ghibli film probably until Princess Mononoke.
Were you watching any anime before then?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
But kind of like Chris brought up, Miyazaki films have their own flavor. So, when I'm growing up, I'm watching, I don't know, Robotech, Ghost in the Shell, stuff like that, Black Magic, like things that they're not available on the streets. You have to know somebody that knows a video store somewhere in the 90s.
Like a guy in a raincoat who has to open it up and be like, hey, do you want some anime?
Yeah, a bunch of old VHSs with like
exactly.
Sharpie.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they were all brought in somehow. So it's either there was a video store on Bloor Street in Toronto. I can't remember what it's called anymore. Black something. Or you'd have to go to a Chinese video store where they had illegal VCDs, imported VCDs and things of that nature. Or because I had Korean and Chinese and Japanese friends, they seemed to have procured it, even though I had no idea how I would get my own. I think Mononoke came out first, and that was a major theatrical release. So I don't think before that I had come across any other Ghibli movies. I could be wrong. I have since really grown to attach myself to the Studio Ghibli pantheon.
Yes, in Canada, we have the benefit of them all being on Netflix, which is really
almost
nice.
all, yeah.
Almost all of them.
The
there's a couple that aren't due to rights things. But yes, in Canada, that is actually not true in the United States as far as I understand it. They are not on Netflix.
Yes,
in
it
the
is
United States.
on HBO Max, which
Ooh.
yeah.
Which is not the same as HBO Go or HBO. So it's really great messaging from the HBO company. So I don't know if I've told this story before. When I was in high school, you had a choice of a language you could take. Now, a lot of people took French, of course, because we grew up in Canada. I decided I wanted to take Japanese because they actually had a Japanese teacher from Japan there on this 2-year term. And so I tried to learn Japanese over 2 years, failed miserably at it, but I still took it as my elective, and I can still write my name in Japanese, and that's about as good as I can do it.
Ooh.
One of the lessons that she did was showing us a Miyazaki film. So the first introduction I had was Totoro, My Neighbor Totoro. And I remember it clear as day, honestly, watching that as a 16 or 17-year-old kid. And that coming on, and you have like the weird little dust mites and the cat bus. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, it was just so fundamentally different than American animation at the time. There's like, I'm so like transfixed, yes, but it's like, I don't really know what's going on. And then getting more and more into film, of course, like Miyazaki is brought up a lot, like referred to as Japan's Walt Disney.
Auteur.
He's the auteur behind it. So I kept hearing about this, about Spirited Away specifically. Spirited Away was like this big touchstone because it was, I think it was on, I want to say it was on an episode of Siskel and Ebert. Don't quote me on that. But I remember them talking about like, this movie has outgrossed Titanic. Like it was like that big over in Japan. And like that was such a huge thing. And so I wanted to see it and eventually did in actually university. And it kind of just like totally blew my mind about like what animation could do, but just a different way to tell a story. And then since then, I basically watched almost all of Miyazaki's films. There's some of the early stuff that I have not seen, but pretty much any of his stuff from the early 90s on, I have. My favorite probably is Princess Mononoke, to be perfectly honest. There's just something about that film that I love watching over and over again.
Bloodworms.
Maybe it's the bloodworms. Could be the bloodworms.
You're into the worms.
That one scarred me a little bit.
Yeah, it is a little bit.
It's disgusting.
I will say, too, it does have, as we all know, it took the Academy Awards so long to honor Best Animated Feature. And so this is the second year that animated features were honored, and Spirited Away was the one who won Best Animated Feature that year. And then I believe until present day is the only anime anime film
possibly
to win.
Nominated. Yeah, there is a small group of animated features that weren't made by Disney or Pixar that have won the Oscar.
It's very small.
And Spirited Away is one of them.
And Shrek is the other. So yes, it's kind of amazing.
Shrek's pretty good.
Yeah,
Shrek's alright.
It won the inaugural award. I always think that's so funny though. It's like Pixar was seen as like this like thing about kids and adults could love, and it's like the one with fart humor is the one that wins the first animated feature award. I like Shrek too. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying.
I'm sure I'll be summoned here for Shrek time.
That's right. Some Shrek stan is going to come at me. Smash Mouth is the best American band from the last 30 years.
Fucking Smash Mouth.
Okay, let's do this. I want to delve into this film, obviously, but we have to watch it first. So I'm going to go thank some sponsors. And then when we return, we'll be talking a little bit more about Spirited Away. Hey there, everyone. Just Kyle breaking into the episode one more time to tell you about some of the people that help make this show continue to go. I'm telling you, sitting here in this weird bunker-like structure with only Dave to, while away the hours with, it gets to you after a while. I think I might be getting a little bit of cabin fever, if you know what I mean, in that I think I have scurvy. I should tell you, though, that Kyle and Dave vs. the Machine is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, locally grown, community supported. The Alberta Podcast Network promotes and supports Alberta-made podcasts and connects their audiences with Alberta-based businesses and organizations. This episode is brought to you by Park Power, a provider of electricity and natural gas in Alberta that offers low rates, awesome service, and profit sharing with local charities.
In Alberta, you get to choose who to buy your energy from. Park Power has low overhead, and chances are you'll save money if you switch. You can find out how much money you could save by visiting parkpower.ca and plugging your numbers into the Alberta Energy Savings Calculator. If you decide to switch, it's easy. Nothing changes about your service, only the price you pay. Learn more at parkpower.ca. This episode of Kyle and Dave versus the Machine is brought to you by the Calgary Foundation. Whether it's funding anti-racism programs, addiction recovery, or food hampers for the hungry, for 65 years, the Calgary Foundation has proudly supported the charitable community to address some of Calgary's biggest challenges. Now, during this period of unprecedented urgent needs, Calgary Foundation renewed its commitment to building a healthy, vibrant, giving, caring, and resilient community. If you're a registered charity looking for a grant, a professional advisor creating a giving plan for your client, or a donor wanting to give back to community, discover a wealth of resources at calgaryfoundation.org and learn more about their work through Calgary Foundation's Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.
So I think great use of our time. But Chris, in the most non-spoilery way possible, what were your impressions this time seeing Spirited Away?
I think that watching it this time after kind of studying animation, I was impressed about like how much they could hold back until, you know, the spectacle happened. It felt like little bundles of mystery, and they would hold you, and there would be answers that you couldn't, you know, see behind the veil until they pulled it back, and there was a bunch of wonder and adventure. I love it so much. It's so great.
I think we actually really blew past this. You do work in animation, so I think that you do have a great insight to this.
Yes.
Versus Dave and I, who admire animation but have never actually done it in our lives.
Yeah, I went to school for animation. I've been in the industry for a couple years now. It is blasphemy to speak ill of Spirited Away, and I will not be doing that.
That's right.
Who hasn't done some light blasphemy in their life?
Dave, how about you? Was there anything specifically that you noticed this time watching it?
It's a great movie. It's beautifully crafted. I think this is still an era where it was 95% hand drawn, or 98%.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris. You might know this better. At least in Miyazaki directed films, is there any 3D, or is it all hand drawn?
They do a lot of compositing with computers. I know that notably Miyazaki's film Ponyo is a film that he wanted to make that's like probably the highest degree of like keeping computers out of the equation,
right?
Since it became kind of prevalent in the 90s. There's a scene where Chihiro like is running through like a bunch of flowers, and then you can kind of see the layers of it coming through. That's something you could only do with computers, unless you want to waste a lot of time, I guess.
I also loved, with that in mind, one of the things that struck me as I've gone through the pantheon of Miyazaki films is the idea of hand animating everything so each frame's moving. You know, there's no static moment. That's one of the most beautiful things I started noticing this time is often, particularly in the older and particularly with serialized TV shows, you have to cheat a bit because, there's just too much to do. So anything that might have movement typically has a different texture or a different tone. You know, there are little cues, but this is a movie where there's almost a sense of perfection. The whole thing is moving synchronously. Is that a word? And it's just, it's something that I've been noticing with great directors of human films. When you can build energy into shots, it just creates, particularly for fantasy genres, it just gives this beautiful sweeping sensation where I really got caught up in it visually. Of course we are going to, it's the whole, beauty of anime, but I thought it was incredible.
In animation, there's this concept called limited animation, and it's techniques that are made knowing that, you know, there are only certain budgets. People have a certain amount of time to make an episode for an animated show. So there are shortcuts, right? You have a still background, you have characters kind of standing with the life sucked out of them until their time comes, and then, you know, they're staying still, but maybe their mouth flap is moving open and closed.
That's how I describe Kyle.
Hey, I'm supposed to do the one-liners here.
But there's also there's limited animation, and then there's full animation where people get, like, usually it's where the budget kicks in, where they're like, we want people's breath to be taken away here. And the motion will be fluid. There's multiple elements moving synchronously. But one thing I like about Miyazaki's films is you would assume that these moments where everything is fluid would be like a fight scene or like 1,000 explosions happening. Miyazaki spends a lot of his budget perfecting really quiet moments where I don't think a lot of people would have the eye or the patience to just sit there with you and take a breath and look at like a field of grass swaying. You know, it's very quaint and beautiful.
That's what I noticed too a lot this time. And maybe I'm just noticing it too the older I get, the filmmakers who are confident enough to be like, we're going to like actually sit in this moment for a bit and having like absolute quiet or stillness, at least in the frame, without having to feel like you're rushed to get to the next thing. It's like, no, we can actually sit in this for a while. For me, I was actually on this rewatch struck by actually how quickly they get into the story. For some reason, I had in my mind it's a bit in the human world more than it is, but it's like they're in the car, they get out of the car, they're walking into this like abandoned area, and then it's like right into that spirit world, and that's what's the rest of the movie for basically the next 90 minutes. And I also noticed the music a lot more this time too. I actually downloaded the album right afterwards. Like, I really like this background music that they're making. It's great. It was said at the time of its release, so this is not something new that I'm bringing to this, but this is very much deeply influenced by Alice in Wonderland, to the degree that I actually started noticing even more things from that original story that are like direct analogs of. I mean, there's a doorknob scene which happens in Alice in Wonderland where it becomes alive. And I honestly thought that I guess the main witch, I don't know if that's what her actual thing is or is described as, or what her power is described as. But if you look at that and like the original illustrations from Alice in Wonderland, she basically looks exactly like the
Queen of Spades, Queen of Hearts.
Not the Queen of Hearts, thank you. The Queen of Hearts that they have
I was
illustrated
wondering why
in those.
you want to play that game.
No, it's just I just like hearts.
All right.
It's those kind of direct analogs. And I think it goes off in a very different direction than that original story. I think what I'm most struck by is what both of you have been kind of talking about, is that the experience of watching this film is simultaneously both soothing to me and that little bit of terror for our main character, our protagonist, of trying to, I know that I want her to escape, and I still also want her to have all these different adventures with these interesting characters that keep coming in at her. To the degree, and I think this is probably a cultural difference that I might just not be picking up on. This is going to sound more of a criticism than I mean it to be, but I don't think that this movie necessarily is about anything in the way that, say, like Princess Mononoke is very deeply into like environmentalism and that sort of kind of storyline. I don't know what this movie is, or if this movie is even interested in trying to be like, we have a point that we want to try and bring forward. I don't really care at the end of the day, but it is interesting that I find that a lot of Miyazaki's films are very deeply rooted in something that he's very interested in and has a specific point of view that he's bringing to it. And I don't really see it much in this one. And yet it's one of my favorite ones that he's done. So I don't know what that says overall.
I think it's very personal, right? Like, it's about a girl who her direction in life is kind of swayed by what her parents are doing, and she doesn't really have her own voice yet. It's such a vague theme, right? Like finding your direction.
Right.
But I think that's why like it's so fun to see like how varied her adventure can be. Is like it's there's no grand mission, there's no MacGuffin other than, you know, get your parents back. But a lot of the time she just kind of is directionless. So we kind of like follow her just living life without knowing what to do. It's very interesting.
Yeah, she's consistently like in over her head. Like, I don't know what's going on. Luckily, the entire audience is the same way. Like, I don't know what's going on either. So, like, let's just go with this type of thing.
Why did they turn to pigs? Why is she turning invisible unless she eats something? Who is that crow up in the sky? There's so much weird stuff happening. Who is this handsome man who is feeding me?
Yeah, exactly. Who doesn't want a handsome man just feeding them all the time?
I feel like the beginning, like you're talking about how it rushes in, isn't... When I left the movie, I thought there's an element where, like many stories, there's a question of morality. So, not morality, what do you call it? Like vices. Mm-hmm. So, you know, to Chris's point, when they're in the car and she has no say whatsoever, just even the first turnoff going into a woodland road, and he becomes this emboldened asshole, and he's just like speeding down. He's like, well, I got the 4-wheel drive, so fuck off, don't tell me what to do. And then they find this hole in a wall, and he's like, we're going in, because he's just got this pride and this thing, and she knows, she has an intuition that this is a big mistake. And is it any wonder that they become pigs?
I think I'd make a good pig.
And I think it is fascinating how her character goes from this passive, fearful person to this through trials and through suffering, that she, to your point, Chris, like she becomes a human being. I think one of the themes with Miyazaki that I think of is so many of his movies are about, they tend to be with children, but girls finding a place where they fit in. Because he, as it turns out, is a fairly progressive guy, particularly for Japan, which has its own cultural issues. I don't know how Japanese you are, Chris, but you know, Japan's got some issues and some denial, we'll call it. So I think it's fascinating. The other thing that's culturally interesting, like the way you brought up, Kyle, is watching a lot of anime. And we talked about this with European films. I think the sensitivity from Puritan America makes us uneasy quicker. So like just that slothy part where they're turning into pigs, it's visceral. But I'm not sure in any other, you know, culture whether they would be so offended by it. I could see people actually in America walking out in that scene, especially nowadays. People are so sensitive to everything. But I think it's powerful. I think it's incredible. It scared the shit out of my son. We tried to watch it last year, and he ran out of the room, just like you talked. But he was 5, so he didn't come back. No, he didn't want any part to do with it. But
did he also not have like a pretty deep reaction to
Santa Paws?
Santa Paws? Yeah.
I was, you know, when we were screening, I was thinking maybe this year he'll watch it. No, he's not ready. I mean, there's some stuff in there that's not. I mean, it's pretty dark.
There's a fine line between fascinating and scarring for life in children's media.
Well, that's why we're here. We're scarred.
I'm really excited to get more into talking about this film. But before we do, let's do some background information. So Spirited Away in Japan was released on July 20th, 2001. However, outside of a few film festivals, it did not get a wide release in North America until March 28th, 2003. So if you did watch it, its initial release, you would have only seen it the Jap. By the way, did anyone watch the dubbed version? Or I watched the original language version.
Putting your Japanese class to use, huh?
That's right. Subs, not dubs, man. Subs, not dubs.
I think I actually have that t-shirt.
Yeah. It is rated 8.6 on IMDb, 96 on Metacritic, and on Rotten Tomatoes, from 188 critics, it's at 97%. And from 337,020 users, it's 96%. That does officially make it the highest rated movie we've talked about on this show.
Wow.
From all of those different sources. Its budget in 1999 was $19 million. it opened, this must have been a very small opening. It opened to $449,000. Just to put this into perspective, so in only America, it grossed $15 million. Not a huge box office in 2001 or in 2003. But internationally, it made $258 million. Wow. So overall, it made $273 million. If you adjust that for inflation, that would be like a movie making $401 million today. So it made a lot of money.
Take that, Shrek.
Take that, Shrek. Its plot description from IMDb is, during her family's move to the suburbs, a sullen 10-year-old girl wanders into a world ruled by gods, witches, and spirits, and where humans are changed into beasts. So that is the official plot description.
Spoiler alert.
I think it is so hard to put a label or synopsis on Spirited Away. It's about so many things.
I know. I agree. It's like, what is it about? It's like, oh yeah, like it's a girl who goes to a spirit world, but that's like the setup. That's not really what it's about.
They haven't gotten to.
I think they should have.
Haku. They haven't talked about Yubaba, the spa owner and witch. So much.
They should have just done the Usual Suspects thing where they say a girl and her family walk down a tunnel.
That's right. I like
that's it. Yeah.
I like the four-armed man. He's really fun.
I just like the ducks.
Oh my gosh, so yeah. There's ducks in the in the hot tubs. They're so great. Because they get down. Like ducks, you look at them and it's like they are partying all night. Now I'm going to totally mispronounce everyone's name and I apologize, but this stars Rumi Hiraji as Chihiro/Sen, Mia Arino as Haku.
Yep,
or Haku.
You got it.
And then Mari Natsuki. Actually, I think it's Matsuke, or like something like that. Mari Natsuke as Yubaba or /Zenaba.
Brilliant.
Zenaba. So, Dave and Chris, do you want to say anything about those actors and actresses? Like we do at this point in the show? Yeah. I did look up what they have done since then. Rumi does a lot of animated kids' voices, I think, if I remember correctly. And then the person who does Yubaba is a very prolific actress who's now in her 60s. And it does animation, live action. She is still working today.
I don't know them. And I think that's a good thing. I remember it being refreshing. Like there was a period, and I think it's still kind of lingering, where all people wanted to do to advertise their animated movie was go, hey, look, it's Haley Joel Osment, or, Zendaya's in this one, guys, watch this, and it's kind of annoying to me. I don't know. I know it draws some parents in. I get the idea of familiarity being a big draw, but I don't like it.
I agree. Like when I can only say, like, growing up, for the vast majority of animated films, like Aladdin would probably have been like the exception because it's like Robin Williams is so well known. But beyond that, it was like, I don't know who does the voices in animated films. I never looked it up or really cared to find out. And then, it was like by the late 90s, early 2000s, for like a 10-year period, it was like, it's Will Smith as a fish, or it's like this person as this thing. And I think that's why I enjoy Pixar a lot, because yes, they're getting like famous people to do it. But who in their right mind in 2004 thought that Albert Brooks and Ellen DeGeneres were going to have the #1 box office film?
Right.
Like no one was going to go and watch something that those two were.
I didn't know who Tim Allen was when I watched Toy Story.
You sound young, Chris, because everybody knows it. No,
I don't want to know who Tim Allen is. Is that helpful?
I think this coincides too with the erosion of media culture in the United States, that they start having to have trailers that reveal the ending. I think that there's a pandering aspect where these huge production companies, need to guarantee that they get however many million people out to these astronomically priced theater seats, and stops being about selling good stories. Like as we see with Disney, they have no integrity anymore. It's just garbage remakes with celebrities, and they're all shit. And
Dave,
every single one of them.
I seem to recall, though, that they have 15 Star Wars series coming out. So I don't know if they're out of ideas. I mean, they have 15
I tried my
shows.
best to boycott The Mandalorian, but I'll admit it's pretty good. But
perhaps something has changed in the week that we have been away from Earth, but we don't have to worry too much about that anymore because theaters don't exist anymore, Dave. So.
I was actually talking to my wife this morning about that, about the end of the world as we know it.
How are you talking to your wife when we've been sequestered in this?
Holograms, obviously.
Oh, right. You knew about these holograms? This was, of course, written and directed by Hayao Miyazaki. And this was after his first retirement. I like to make that point because there was a time where it seemed like after every film, he said, like, I'm done. I'm not making another film. And if I remember correctly, he said that after Mononoke, like, I'm retired, I'm not doing another film, then came back and made this film. And then I'm pretty sure he said that after every single film he's made.
One more and I'm out.
Yeah.
Just mic dropping, man. You gotta drop the mic.
Yeah. But if we're going to talk about his work as a writer and director, then of course we have to talk about My Neighbor Totoro, Kiki's Delivery Service, Castle in the Sky, Porco Rosso, Princess Mononoke, Howl's Moving Castle, and Ponyo. His last film was The Wind Rises in 2013, where he retired for, I believe, the fourth time, but is coming back with How Do You Live, probably in 2022 at the very earliest, with the description of the psychological growth of a teenage boy through interactions with his friends and uncle. That is what his latest film will be about.
Watch it be about something else completely.
Oh, yeah, like...
If it's not ducks, I'm not going to go watch it. But I'm just looking at my notes. You know, when you asked me earlier about Miyazaki, you know what my first Miyazaki movie was? It was Nazca, Valley of the Wind.
Oh, really?
And I watched it when I was a kid, and I really liked that.
That's the one where most people don't like it. So
that's a weird as fuck movie too. Yeah, that's a beautiful movie. And Lupin, Castle of Cagliostro. But I don't know if I watched his film because there's 1 million anime, manga.
Yeah, well, the Lupin character seems to be something very beloved. I guess I forgot because there was a TV series. There's been a few movies made. I think they're making a 3D movie version of that, isn't it?
Have you seen the Netflix trailer? France made one.
Oh, France made, okay.
Called Lupin. Yeah, it looks pretty good. It's the guy from the Intouchables.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I just saw the trailer. I mean, not that we get trailers in a spaceship, but
if you were, it's on Netflix. If I was
watching a lot of Netflix, I may have seen the upcoming trailer.
We should ask your robot for Netflix.
May already be released.
Yeah, we should ask, hey, can we get Netflix?
Sure, but it's on a 1 light year time delay.
We have Netflix now, Dave.
The stars, that's the question.
No. No stars.
Identity theft is no laughing matter.
I guess getting into some more, we can spoil anything in the movie here now. I'm going to throw this open. Chris, is there a favorite moment that you have?
I think the scene with No Face is really, it just kind of sticks to me, I think. And
which one?
Can I say like everything with No Face kind of sticks with
everything
me?
With No Face? Sure.
Especially with like Sen or Chihiro saving the day through kind of like compassion. I don't think that sort of solution is that common, and it plays off beautifully. And I don't know, it warmed my heart.
There's something that I've become increasingly passionate about, and people are probably going to label me as being naive or overly optimistic, but there's this growing sentiment about when you look at like wealth inequality or the deep divisions we have with class in North America, I'm talking in general, but all over the world. Whereas there's really only one way to kind of break that chain is like, it's to give up your own power, which is hard to do, I get, but it's like, if you make that decision, it's like, I don't actually want to have, let's say, all this pot of gold of money, and that's not what drives me. I want to push that away as much as possible. That's a powerful thing that you can do, and your integrity to do it, but you also are lucky enough to have that even be an option for you is really what I'm trying to say. But I feel this film is kind of supporting that, and that like, I'll give you money. It's like, I don't want money. That's not what my main driving force is here. I want to help my friend and overall want to have my parents back and stuff. But I don't know, there's something to that the drive here is not for monetary gain or even like direct gain for her. She is being driven because she wants to do something nice for somebody else. That is what her driving force is for this movie. And I think that's just really interesting to watch.
Going back to my idea that there are strong vice themes, I got the sense, that No Face was her insecurities. So it's people pleasing, it's this cowardice, and she only faces it towards the end of the movie. And so, for example, the idea that greed or gold or trying to make everyone around her happy would have value, and she's got to find that voice that actually gives her power, which is that I don't need to do any of this stuff. I just need to stick with what I really believe in. No Face is a weird character, man. I like just the mutation.
Well,
from a benign bridge haunting mask.
Well, that's what I love about
slime eating fucking.
I know. Well, what I love about the movie is that it feels like it's such a benign and benevolent figure at the very beginning, but I should say it's just a benign figure, just like observing things. And then once it comes into the bathhouse, it's just like, oh, it kind of gets corrupted and it becomes so gross. Like when she gives it that like little half ball thing that she feeds it, and it's like just puking out this like
moss ball,
like ichor of disgusting stuff. It's just like, yeah, no, you have to sometimes. For me, it's like sometimes you have to face your internal darkness, and it does feel like you're puking up disgusting stuff to get past to the next step, right?
You're losing,
and it's like a visualization of that idea.
She gets the moss ball from saving the river god. In spite of her fear, right? Like, there's all this great metaphorical script and imagery of how she can earn the ability to, I think, save herself in that moment. I like that part. And you want to talk about environmentalism, when she's pulling the plug and you think maybe he's just stabbed, and it turns out to be human refuse. Right? That's a pretty strong point, It's kind of a quick fuck you to commercialism and consumption.
It's got a lot of quick fuck yous to a lot of things.
I just like thinking after all that stuff is just sitting there, it's like, man, who has to clean that up? It's probably the frogmen, which is probably not a very...
Oh, they don't clean. No,
they don't
it's
clean?
The women. Yeah, it's the women,
Gotcha.
Unfortunately, in that world.
I'm on record that I support child labor.
I want to talk maybe a little bit more about the idea like that, the humans coming into the spirit world, because I think, of course, that's like the inciting action. And what's the boy's name again that I'm now... Haku?
Yeah.
Is that what's his name? That's what we eventually find out his name is.
No, that's the dragon's name. His full name is very long.
Yeah,
it's very long.
I couldn't tell it to you.
Something.
I like that interplay. I guess really what I'm trying to say here is like what I've always enjoyed about other, we'll call them like myths and legends, is that the gods always seem so fallible. And, if you read like Greek myths and stuff like that, like all of those people are like the worst possible entities in the world. Like they're not like put up on a pedestal being like, these are great things to adhere to, which doesn't really happen, I find, in the Western canon, because you have like the god that people worship, and like he's a light and he's the perfect being and all that kind of stuff. And here you have people that are literally gods, like river gods and dragons and witches, and they're all like, some of them are petty, some of them are good, some of them are embarrassed. Like there's all this stuff that's going on. It's like, oh, that feels like a much more lived in real world and so fun to play around with, rather than maybe the limitations of some other nations' deities.
Yeah.
Chris might know this better, but the Japanese religion, not just Shinto, but their cultural concepts of what gods are and the kami and how they interact with human beings is fundamentally different than Western ideologies. Never mind Judeo-Christian ones. And if we want to make this a 4-hour podcast, I can go off, Kyle. We can talk about it if you want, but
I mean, the basic belief is like everything has a spirit in it, right? Like that's kind of, I had some people in Japan tell me like, you have to finish your rice every time because there's every little rice. What's the unit of rice? What's a rice unit? Every grain.
A grain of rice.
Every grain has a little god in it. And if you don't eat it, you're displeasing them. Little stuff like that.
I have displeased so many gods in my lifetime.
Well, that's why we're cursed here in the West. We're not doing so well, man. Yeah.
I do have to say, there's a point where Chihiro is fed like this little triangle rice thing.
Onigiri, yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know what that is, but it makes me so hungry. I really want to eat it.
Just go to a Japanese store. They're so good. You can get them filled with different things.
Yeah.
Tuna, meat, sugar.
Ooh.
Good old rice.
So you can have like
Frogs,
a savory
yeah.
and then a sweet one right afterwards. That's perfect.
Yeah. The one thing I thought was funny watching her eat that, and this is such an anime thing, you know, when they get really hungry and they chow down, if I put a mouthful of rice, I have to drink something because it's really hard for me to, like, I love rice, but I always love animation where you can shovel 40 pounds of rice into your mouth. I wish I could do that. Just put more things in my mouth.
I am just a very idiosyncratic person. I've had deep conversations with previous roommates about the consistency that I like my rice in, because I actually do like it a little bit more wet than dry.
I've heard that about you. Yeah,
I'm a very wet person. What do you think? I mean, I started this off by saying that I don't think this movie's about anything, but do you agree with that, disagree with that, or do you have an idea that you would throw at me of what this movie is trying to say?
I think it's one of those movies where its themes are not spoken loudly. It's conveyed in ways of, like, in just the way that characters act without speaking about it. I think it conveys a message of, like, kindness and reservation, and like, characters act with compassion. People are rewarded for kind of not wanting like anything grand, but acting in kindness for others is rewarded. I think it's like promoting without overtly stating like a way a person should be.
How about you, Dave? Do you have anything?
No, I think that's it. I think that any good story has a moral center, not a moralizing one. So I think that we get a reflection that everybody in the movie who suffers is somebody that has given themselves up to some vice, you know, some type of greed. Even as Chris was talking about the Japanese spirituality, you know, how interesting is it now that I look back that when they pull out all the garbage out of the river god, those are all objects that have been thrown away, that have been treated poorly, that were not respected, and they're choking out the natural spirit of the world. I think I think those are beautiful themes that Miyazaki's able to, throughout his career, to present beautifully, not just as art, but in a way that anybody, whether it's nerds like us who actually are, you know, with a notebook trying to pull it apart, or just somebody sitting in a theater and passing through 90 to, 120 minutes and leaving, you're gonna get an intuition that there's something spiritual, not just about Spirited Away, but any good anime experience. There was an old theory, I don't think this holds true anymore, but they used to say that the concept was, I mean, Chris can correct me if I'm wrong, but to create as generic a face as possible so that the viewer could put themselves into the story. So when you're watching an animated movie, the Japanese sort of process was to make the backgrounds and all of the environmental things as beautiful and perfect as possible, but the characters would be very simplistic so that when you're watching it, you become part of the movie. Whereas historically American animation is the opposite, where Disney is kind of 50-50, but you generally have a shitty backdrop, and then you make these like very ornate comic books, like this very ornate. Every Marvel X-Men's got to have a different fucking wrinkle on his nose, but they become very separate.
Yeah,
and I've been noticing with anime it's changing a little bit, but
I think like that's interesting. There are stories where bold characters leave an impression on the world, and I think a lot of Miyazaki stories have characters where the world is a character itself that is leaving an impression on, like, for example, Chihiro, right? Good movie.
That's a good point. I think what I also take away from this, the characters that are presented in this film are either our protagonist who is like, has these, we'll say like, quote unquote, like negative traits that she's kind of working through and eventually gets past, but everyone else also has like two different sides to them, right? Like Yubabe, it seems like this gruesome, like awful woman, but she has this deep love for this like giant baby person who is in her care. And then the first time we see her twin sister who arrives, she is presented as being like this evil witch character, but is actually a very kindly and matronly woman when Chihiro finally meets up with her the very first time. And you see that, I think, kind of going through the whole thing where there's these good and bad parts of people. I don't even want to say good and bad. There's just like these like, things that take their attention and don't take their attention, things that they are trying to focus on and things that they don't care about. And that is what I think it's all wrestling with, is that there's these things underneath the surface that if we don't probe enough, we would never see that. But that this movie try and prioritizes, just like the stuff we, out of sight, out of mind, throw away into the river and think that we'll never see it again. Well, that is impacting someone further on down the line. In very much the same way as if you're a people pleaser, you might be doing something that's positive for you right now, but is actually a kind of a negative impact further on down the line. But it is never explicitly said. And I think that is probably what makes me so enjoy this film, is that it isn't being pedantic or like, this is what we're trying to say to you here. It's more like, hey, we're presenting all this stuff to you, and you can kind of just pull out what you want when you need it, sort of thing. So yes, I agree. Great movie.
I just read The Odyssey, and Emerson's got
in the original Greek, I'm assuming.
Well, in a direct translation of the prose. My one criticism is that because it's direct translation of the poem, every fifth fucking paragraph is about them eating and drinking to their full. It's like I get it, there's a cultural thing, but if I have to read one more feast, one more goddamn, like it's
won't
exhausting.
like me to say this, but I felt that way in Lord of the Rings sometimes, where it's like, yeah, I get it, you're eating food.
But at least they had hobbits, so the characters, want 6 meals a day. But now I'm just being defensive. So then Emerson's I bought him this book. It's like Myths from Around the World for kids, and it's illustrated. It's a great book. But he's really tied into Hercules. And I think that all the great stories are like this, where there's dimensionality. You mentioned how the gods in all of these old mythologies are not the so-called good, singular Judeo-Christian. I mean, is it any wonder why we're so corruptible now? Because that's such a bullshit idea that there's a being.
Well, I was going to ask you, is one of those myths from around the world capitalism working?
Yeah. Well, no, because it's so impossible. It couldn't even be an ideal. But no, but he gets some of it, right? When he reads a small paragraph about Hercules outsmarting something or wrestling thing because of a play on words, there are lessons, that don't need to be about punishment.
Say amen. There he goes again. Sweet and undefeated and an awesome 10 for 10.
All great stories are like that.
Little mini amuse-bouche of morals.
Well, yeah, why not? It's better than someone force-feeding you,
Yeah.
mistake.
And just talking about the animation too, like I think we've talked about some of our favorite scenes and stuff like that, but there's 2 moments I love, which is her flying on the dragon, coming back, and then like falling to the ground. There's just some beautiful work that's going on there. And for the quiet moment, I love the train ride. Because again, that's such a common filmmaker to be like, we're going to spend like this, like a minute and a half of them just sitting on a train and they're just going to their destination. They don't feel like they have to cut that directly, because it's like, no, we want to be in this moment of her being like a little bit trepidatious about going of where she's about to end up, sort of thing. So
I just have a quick trivia thing we skipped over, which is they had, apparently Studio Ghibli created a no cut, no edit policy for distribution in the States, because when they released, I can't remember which movie it was, it might have been Nazca, but the studio decided that American audiences just wouldn't get it, and they recut the entire movie. And so Miyazaki's like, well, fuck you, that'll never happen again. When we do Ghibli, there's a contract. If you're going to distribute it, it has to. So apparently our favorite producer, Harvey Weinstein, was the guy that was going to release, is it this one? And he sent back notes that it needed to be recut. And apparently Ghibli response was send him a samurai sword and say no cuts, which I think is great. Because if anyone deserved to get a threatening gift, it's probably Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah, that's like reminds me of Bong Joon-ho, who was also working with Harvey Weinstein. I don't think it was on Parasite. I think it was the one right before that, which I can't remember which movie that was now. Yeah, it might have been Snowpiercer, actually, now that I say that. Harvey Weinstein said, like, you have to cut this scene. And he's like, I can't cut this scene because the fish in this is so special to me because my father was a fisherman and this is like a tribute to my father. And he's like, oh, well, family is the most important thing. Of course, keep the scene. It's like, my father was not a fisherman. He just lied so that he could keep his scene in the movie. And I think that's so funny.
Why do production companies get, well, I mean, you need an editor, but
I would
Harvey Weinstein should not be making decisions.
I'd love a collection of stories, just an omnibus of people sticking it to Harvey Weinstein. That would be
Yeah,
a
it'd be so
perfect
good.
Christmas gift.
We're done here.
Well, the machine has told us that we do have to wrap up here. So I guess we should ask our like kind of favorite question then on this show, which is like, does this film hold up and do you think it's still culturally relevant? Chris, what are your answers to those questions?
Yes, I think it holds up. It is a testament to good animation and patience and care being put into making animation. And also, I think it's really subtle messaging is more important now than ever.
It is interesting to me, though. I don't know if you have an outlook on this, Chris, of why do you think it seems like North America has made that switch so hard into 3D animation? And I'm not here to bag on 3D. I love a lot of 3D movies. But it seems like Japan, but like Asia in general, is still so much invested in the 2D animated film.
No,
Like,
that's not
do
true.
you know why that is?
I mean, I think there's a stigma right now, right? So, like, I think the only studio in America that can produce animation and adults will go see it is Pixar, right? And they make CG animated movies. There is a certain spectacle to, we have powerful computers that can make realistic scenes, and American audiences want that, like, the bigger firework, the more explosions. And so I think a lot of them are drawn to the spectacle of CG a little more.
Yeah, it's just fascinating. I mean, because there's a video you can watch on YouTube about basically Miyazaki saying, like, I am never making a full 3D animated feature, because it's like, what does he say? It's something like, this is an abomination of animation or something like that. It's like, I'll never do this. Which, by the way, Ghibli is making a 3D animated film, though. So who knows?
Well, he isn't.
He's not, though.
Yeah.
Hopefully someday someone will render me.
But Dave, do you think this still holds up? Do you think it still has cultural relevance?
Yeah, of course. I agree with everything Chris said. I think that these are one of those few films where it should be mandatory. If I were the ruler of the earth, and we know that's going to happen, people would be chained to a desk, and they would Clockwork Orange this shit, so you'd have to watch it.
Yeah.
No, I think it will stand the test of time. I mean, the beautiful thing about fantasy when it's well executed is it transcends the idea of what's important in a visual or spectacle sense. So, like, in 40 years, if we watch any of your MCU universe movies,
I made them specifically.
They might date a little bit, right? If we're in a world where everything, whatever the imagination. So, if we're in a Minority Report world where everything is like AR and VR, watching Scarlett Johansson roll around with a handgun and chop, like, that might actually feel old one day.
Oh, I think it will. I think that there's no doubt about that. You see that even with films that were made in the late 90s that we watched. Like, ooh, like at the time this felt like modern, and now it absolutely does not. I think animation does have a little bit of a leg up in that regards, because you can watch animated films from the 70s that still like don't necessarily feel like they were made in the 1970s. I won't say every single one.
Well, I just watched Castle of Cagliostro. And anime from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, it has its own style. So some of them doesn't age very well, but the stories are great. And I think there's a reason why that manga is now being produced again and again and again. I mean, that's a great story. It's fun. Who doesn't like a good heist?
But I was just saying, like, to your point, whereas I don't think that every single MCU film is going to hold up in 30 years. I'm planting my flag and saying that Spider-Verse might.
Spider-Verse is great,
right? And it's an animated film too. So
I want to know what you guys think is gonna be the most dated in 10 years of all the MCU films.
Well, Thor: Dark World will be in the shitter, so
Yeah.
that's just garbage.
The Thor films, I actually think don't really hold up much now, even like 10 years after they were made. So there's that. To be honest, if you look at all of them, for me, it is the lesser ones. Like the Iron Mans, I think there's still stuff there that can work. And in the first couple, it was all practical effects anyway, so you don't even have to worry about like the amazing special effects. But I find like the Ant-Man films, the Thor films, the first couple at least. What is the other one? Oh, the Hulk, like the Incredible Hulk. Like I don't think people are going to be watching those. The Iron Man, the last two Captain America films, even the Avengers films, I think people are still going to have some love for.
Say something that might be a little controversial?
Sure, let's do it.
That's why we're here.
I like Winter Soldier. I don't think it's going to hold up in 10 years because it's so tied to current events. Or it will be even more relevant in the future. I don't know.
There we go. We're going to have to wait and see what happens. Well, that's the hard thing is like there's some movies that are so prescient. Like I remember, and this is on me, and there were so many critics at the time that said that, but that movie Contagion that Steven Soderbergh made, and be like, I feel like this is like, they're having people act really weird. Like no one would ever do this if there's a real contagion happening. And guess what? It's exactly how everybody acted when the contagion happened. Oh, no. Like, you know what I mean? So
I think
I still don't really love that movie a whole lot, but still, you can have things that become relevant over time when they feel like they're so like off base when they're first made.
I think one of the biggest fundamental denials is that we want to say that fiction is what's impossible rather than a story that's designed around actual experiences. You know, how much of current technology is based off of Jules Verne being like a total, probably on LSD or some psychedelics. And now we're like, well, we've got to make this shit. He said it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what happened with Star Trek. You talk to anyone who were in development for like walkie-talkies, cell phones, all that kind of stuff. All that stuff was made because they were Star Trek fans. And they were like, we want to make this stuff when we grow up because that was cool when we saw that.
There's a hoverboard. It's shit. Nobody has one, but someone built one.
But someone made it. Yeah. Anyways, so that's what Dave and Chris and I thought about Spirited Away. But what do you think? You can send any feedback to kyleanddavevsthemachine at gmail.com. You can also find us on Twitter or Instagram with the handle KDVSTM. If you want to see the entire list of films we've watched and the ratings we've given, you can go to our Letterboxd page, letterboxd.com/KDVSTM. Right now, you'll actually see two lists going on. One that is for the movies of 1999. One is that the films that we have watched of the top 250. And if you want to support us monetarily so that we can continue doing this podcast up here in our bunker, you can go to our Patreon page. There's a link in the show notes of this episode, and you can support for as low as $1 per month. Of course, we do not want you to donate if it in any way causes you financial hardship. And something you can do for absolutely free is to leave a rating and review on whatever app you use for podcasts. Now, I always feel bad when we have a guest on. Chris, your rating doesn't matter.
Darn it.
If you were to give a rating to Spirited Away out of 5, what would you give Spirited Away?
I would have to say 5. It is every time I watch it, there's this feeling of you have to remember this. And I don't know. Yeah. It's not my favorite movie, I'll say that, but like it just feels like it's like a core movie. Yeah, 5.
Dave, how about you?
Yeah, 5. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, it's gonna be 5s across the board because I'm gonna give it a 5 too, which means that yes, it is going at the top of our Letterboxd top 250 films of all time, at least the ones that we have watched so far.
Woo!
Quick question before we have to turn off the projector for Chris.
It's the machine I think is going to overheat here any second.
Which animal do you guys connect most with?
Oh, the ducks for sure.
Like in general, or
right? The ducks are the best.
I love the ducks. If I could be any animal in the world, I would be a platypus. So it's kind of like a duck. But also a mammal.
You'd have to lay some eggs, though.
And because I'm a male, I would actually have a poisonous talon on my hind foot. So, fun fact about the platypus. So, I guess we're going to have to find out what we're watching here next week. Machine's asked me to push this button. Oh, we're going to have to spend some time here, Dave. Next week, we're watching The Godfather Part 2.
Ooh.
I have seen Part 1. I've actually never seen
Scott.
Part 2 before. So this is actually going to be a new
Sorry,
experience
did you
for
say
me.
you've never watched Godfather Part 2 before?
In the spirit of our fiction, I have never seen The Godfather Part 2.
How are you running a movie podcast?
I don't know. It's
Check your
people have asked
credentials.
that for many, many reasons. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us here, Chris. I guess I should ask you here too. If people wanted to follow you, see what else you were up to, how can they do so online?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was very fun. If anybody wants to see what I do animated music videos and storytelling on my YouTube channel, Tanimayto. Tanimayto. Tanimayto.
Great. And if you don't know, Chris also designed our podcast artwork. So yes, he has
I did.
has a great hand for just illustration, but animation as well.
Just a quick question, Chris.
Yeah.
Did you watch Wolf Walkers?
I just did. Oh my god. I loved it.
So good, right?
I have not seen it yet, but I've heard nothing
So
but good things.
good.
Apparently, we're getting some great animated films this year because there's that, and Soul is coming out pretty soon. Or actually has already come out when you're listening to this episode.
Yeah, it
both
was
of these
great.
things are
We
out
just watched
already.
Animation is pandemic proof. So
Dave, I guess we should still continue playing this game.
stay strong, boys.
How many cards?
Bye.
Oh, the projector's failing.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
Wait a second. Are those like Queen of Spades cards that are up your sleeve?
Isn't that how you play the game?
You son of a bitch.
I think I'd make a good pig.
Welcome to Kyle and Dave versus the Machine, Patreon exclusive. Pew pew. Today we're talking about Existence. Dave, what's your history with this film, if at all?
I had a phase. I had a phase in high school where I thought it was cool to watch some cool Canadian films.
So, what options did you have for cool Canadian films?
The one we talked about the most, probably Red Violin. This film.
Oh, stop it! You and the Red Violin of all movies. Guys, you gotta see this. It's about a violin that goes through the centuries.
What was the other one that Don McKellar? The one with the.
I mean, Don McKellar's been in a bunch. I loved Way Downtown. That was a fun movie.
What was the one?
There was Hard Night, something. It was about a band.
And then there was that famous one with, is it the schoolgirl stripper? No, there was another one.
Sweet Hereafter is maybe the one you're.
And then, anyways,
Adam McGoyan.
So I watched this.
Basically, any Canadian movie has to have at least Don McKellar, Sarah Polley, or Callum Keith Rennie in it, and they're all in this one, which is fun.
And it has to be really fucked up. Because apparently Canadians aren't as nice and polite as you want us to believe.
over on my bookshelf, actually, this is from university. They gave us a textbook called Weird Sex and Snowshoes, all about Canadian film. Because that's basically a lot of Canadian film. It has weird sex in it somewhere, and it's usually somewhere in the snow at some point.
It's how we do. That's just how we do out here. I mean, what else are you supposed to do when you're snowed in half the fucking year?